This video is free to watch thanks to the kindness of our donors. If you would like to donate £10 towards our work, you can do so by texting Henshaws to 70085.
My name is Matilda. I'm also known as Matty Art, and I'm 28 years old, and I live between, I would say, Manchester and Barcelona at the moment. I don't know where to start, really. I think I've had a bit of a alternative life. I was born in London, but I grew up abroad most of my life. So I went to Costa Rica when I was 6, and I lived there until I was 18, and then I moved back to London. I studied at university in London, and then I moved out to Barcelona when I was about 21. And I've been living there for about 5 years, and the last year I've been living mostly in Manchester. I've also had eyesight problems like my whole life. So since I was very young, I was pretty much blind in my right eye. So I've always had that. And then the last few years I've been having some issues in my left eye. And I've always been very creative my whole life. And I think actually the last few years, I've been maybe pressuring myself to do more and more creative things, just because I think in the long term, I'm not really gonna have very good vision in my left eye. So that's kind of like a big thing that's pushed me and driven me to be more and more creative. So right now at the moment, I'm working full-time. I work in the creative sector, creating content, written and also visual. And on the side, I'm also doing my art and my personal projects. So I'm quite busy, honestly. Yeah, so technically it's called uveitis, which means like inflammation of the eyes. This is caused from arthritis. So I also have like some problems in my knees sometimes, but pretty much all stable now. So because of the uveitis, the inflammation of the eye, I had a cataract in my right eye when I was very young. And I'm actually blind in the eye because of the cataract. And then I got a cataract in my left eye a few years ago, and now I have an intraocular lens in my left eye, and I see pretty okay. So that's the eye condition at the moment. I'm quite stable. But last year I did have a retinal detachment in my right eye. So I realized like it's not something that you just have an operation. You know, if you have a cataract, you have an operation, that's it. It's something that I'll probably have to deal with the rest of my life. I remember going to, you know, like first year primary school, having to wear eye patches, actually in my left eye, because they were trying to strengthen the right eye. So from a very young age, I noticed that I was a little bit different from the other kids, because I thought it was quite cool back then, because they were like, oh, you look a bit like a pirate, and I loved that. You know, when you're like 6 years old, that's like the best thing in the world. But yeah, then I moved out to Costa Rica, and I felt like I had quite a normal childhood. I was very happy. I didn't really think too much about my eyesight, I think, because it's just yours, and you just think that's the way it is, it's yours. And then the last few years, when I've had problems in, let's say, my other eye, which is, let's say, my good eye, I've kind of felt the pressure of, oh, I need to take more care of myself. Just the pressure of, okay, eyesight's something I might not have forever, so I feel a lot more grateful about the eyesight I have nowadays. Yeah, so I've loved art since a really young age. I loved writing, I loved drawing, I loved painting. At school, it was probably the only subject I took very seriously. When I left school, I didn't really think about it so much. I was at university, I was traveling. And when I went to Barcelona, I started having problems in my good eye. And I was a bit scared I was actually going to go completely blind. So this really made me actually get back into painting, because I thought I have about 6 months before this operation, which I might go blind from. So I just thought I'm going to paint as much as I can. And so I did, and then I did the operation, and actually, you know, touch wood, it went really well. So I have like an intraocular lens now in my left eye. And since then, I just haven't really stopped. I've just been doing more and more paintings. In the end, I did an exhibition based on those paintings I did before the operation. And it's quite fascinating looking back at them, because even my sister says to me, Like she thinks the colors I used were so strong because of like, say the bad eyesight I have then. And a lot of people like those paintings. I think, oh, it's so fascinating that I created that because of the eyesight I had at the moment at that time. So I think that's quite an interesting thing that, yeah, I would never be able to create that again in that same way. So I even have like a tattoo now, which is called, which is like to symbolize that whole time in my life. But basically it's called borrós, so that means blurry in Catalan. So that was the name of the exhibition. And like this tattoo is quite interesting for me because the snake, in my eyes, the snake represented like poison. And I always thought my eyesight loss was something very bad for me. It was a negative thing. I was embarrassed to talk about it. You know, like I thought it was poison. So when I was talking to the tattoo artist, I said, I would like something that symbolizes like something that's negative, but also positive. And he actually said the snake is actually a symbol of transformation in life. And it goes through these different like chapters. And I love that kind of idea of something originally thinking, you know, oh, this is a bad thing. And it's actually transformation. And it kind of goes through, well, the snake goes through the right eye, which is my blind eye. So for me, it's like complete symbology of this tattoo. And it was kind of representing a moment in my life where I went to Barcelona, I was being a bit silly, I was partying a lot, I wasn't taking care of myself. And from that experience of nearly losing my eyesight completely, I've come out like a lot stronger, wiser, mature. I'm like really focused on my art. And I feel like I'm very grateful now for that time. So I wanted to just have this kind of post-it reminder on me to always be grateful of, let's say, what we considered once negative. So that's one of my tattoos. But yeah, so I think that kind of describes my story in quite a fast way. And that was like a few years ago. And like I said, I haven't really stopped since. I'm just still creating, trying to get more and more serious. I've been in Manchester for last year. Amazing city, so creative. People like welcomed me here with open arms. So we're gonna go see some like the mural later, right? That we have in the galleries, and yeah, really, really grateful, honestly. So I think that's why I'm here telling my story, because one point I was in a very dark place and I thought this is the end, and now looking back, I'm just really, really grateful I had that, because I wouldn't be where I am now. So. Yeah, so with my art, I love to experiment. I would say maybe a bit too much, because in the art world, you should kind of follow a certain set of materials and ideas, and I love to experiment. So let's say the piece behind me is a mixture of different paints, because I like to create a lot of different textures and basically create different styles from the textures, the way you see it, the way you touch it. So it has a base of like acrylic paint, and then basically on top is wall paint, what we call like industrial paint, or enamel paint also. Basically a mix, because it's quite liquidy, so that's why it's a bit more, if you want to drip something, it's better to do it more liquidy, because else the acrylic paint's just quite stiff. Mostly I use a combination of different materials in my paintings. I think it might even have a bit of a base of spray paint. So I love spray paints, I love acrylic paints, I love wall paint. Depends a little bit if you want to create texture, if not. Lately I've been doing a lot of murals, which I love because, like, especially with my eyesight, I have quite a bit of difficulty doing a lot of details. So with murals, you can just paint really big, which is fun. I also use my iPad a lot, like a tablet, and there's an app where you can zoom in, you can draw. So I definitely recommend it, because that's really, I would say that's really useful, because if you want to do details, but you can't really, you can just always zoom in. And so you use like an Apple Pencil, and you can just draw and zoom in, and it's pretty fun. Like if you just want to play around with it, or you can create some really cool stuff. But I would say it's interesting nowadays because if you want to be creative, you don't have to do it just one way. Like maybe you think, oh, I'm just going to paint, I'm just going to draw, but actually there's so many different ways of expressing yourself and being creative. So that's what I try and do, always kind of try different ways. I don't know, I love it. I just love touching the paint, and it's like being a kid. I think it's really important to just feel like a kid sometimes and play, I feel like this one, that was a fun piece. But there's a serious side to art though for me as well. Like I do use it to tell my story, even maybe if it's subconsciously. Like I did this art piece, and then when I look back and try and explain it, it does definitely have a bit of my eyesight story in it. Like the blurry lines and the use of the texture and the different layers. And I like the idea that viewer has to imagine some parts. They can see, okay, it's a flower, it's flowers, but it's not, solid lines. That kind of concept of them stepping into my shoes and seeing the way I do. I would say a few of the challenges I have at the moment with my eyesight is more maybe this acceptance side. Like when I have quite bad eyesight in both my eyes, I get quite frustrated because I feel like I lose a bit of independence, and I've had to come to terms with adopting new ways to do things, realizing that I'm frustrated, but I need to kind of move that frustration to just learning how to do things in a different way, and also being more open to maybe people helping me, like my sister, asking for help, and just focusing a lot more on my health. And I'm a very independent person, and especially living abroad by myself, I realized if I'm not taking care of my health, no one else is. So being very strict about going to doctor's appointments, checkups, medicine, trying to be a bit healthy in my lifestyle. I would say I'm a bit, I like to push the limits a bit. I like to travel a lot. I like to do a lot of new experiences. And I've realized that I definitely need to prioritize my health in all of that. And that's been a bit of a challenge for me, because I feel like at the beginning, I felt as a young person, it was very restricting, having these eyesight problems, but I've tried to change my mindset about it and see it more as a positive way, especially with my art, thinking, okay, I can use this story and my vision to literally create something that's hopefully quite unique and maybe inspiring. Because especially with Henshaws, I've seen that you can have a full-time job, you can do interesting things, you can be creative, you can do pretty much anything. Possibly you might just have to do it in a different method, Okay, so this is a funny story because I was in London, I was single, I was young, and I got invited to this very fancy restaurant for a date. So we go there, and I don't want to put my glasses on because it's a date, right? And I get there and it's so dark. These fancy restaurants are so dark. I was like, I literally can't even see what's written on the menu. So I don't want to say anything because it's the first date. So I asked the waiter, hey, what do you recommend? And he's like, oh, it's like the, seafood pasta is great here. I was like, yeah, I'll get one of those, whatever. Have it, nothing too special. At the end, the bill comes. I don't really know how then I could see the bill. I saw the bill, and my pasta was like £60. Yeah, and I was like, oh my God, I've ordered the most expensive thing on the menu. And I was a student at the time, so I was like, oh my God, this is like my weekly budget right here. And luckily the guy was very kind and he got the bill, but that was one of the moments where I thought, oh my God, here's my eyesight getting into trouble, you know what I mean? This happened countless of times, like dating with eyesight. It's eyesight loss is quite funny. But things like this happen to me all the time. People are like, oh yeah, like or point, like, oh look at that bird over there. I'm like, like I'm just gonna imagine it, But a lot of people say to me also, oh, you have beautiful eyes, because I don't know the color, I guess. And like this one's a different color but it's actually because of the blindness that it's lost pigment. But people are like, oh my God, you're so amazing, you have different color eyes, or they're so beautiful. And I just stay there quiet because it's like, yeah, if you only knew, But some people say like, oh, I really wish I'd have your eyes, I'd do anything to have your eyes. I'm like, you just laugh, Not gonna go into details, but that happens a lot. So I used to have a really good friend who was my flatmate. And sometimes she'd be very confused because this was the time I was having quite bad eyesight back in Barcelona. And she said to me, it's very confusing because sometimes I'll point to something and you'll be like, I can't really see that. And another day I'll point to something again, you'll be like, yeah. So I have a hard time understanding like what your eyesight is. And I say, yeah, me too, because it's changing all the time. So one day I might wake up and it's a bit blurrier, and another time it might be better. So I think for most people, I think they just don't really understand that it's just not black and white. There's so many different conditions, so many different days that you might feel, different. So the relationship I have with my friends and my family, I would say has changed a lot the last few years because I kept my eyesight journey very private to me. I was possibly, I would even say, a bit ashamed. All my friends at the time were young, going out a lot, traveling, like just quite normal. And I felt like I had this kind of other side that I need to go to the doctor a lot, to the hospital. And it made me a little bit maybe like embarrassed because I wanted to be doing the same things they were. Nowadays, I feel a lot more confident in myself. And I feel very confident even talking about it. So maybe it's something that's not very nice to talk about at a dinner party, you know, I've been going to the doctor, blah, blah, blah. But nowadays I just feel like it is what it is, and I kind of embrace it. I would say I'm very independent, and I've had to accept opening up, you know, asking for help. Yeah, just accepting it, just being a bit more embracing of the situation. So because last year I had a retinal detachment, I flew into Manchester from Barcelona, and I went to the Royal Eye Hospital here in Manchester. And I was, you know, went to the emergency, and I was seeing doctors because of this. And then just one day, like a few weeks after this, I got a phone call, and I think it was Josh from the office here, and he just introduced himself. He said, yeah, the NHS has passed your case along to us. I was like, what is this? I was like really like skeptical, thinking, what's the NHS doing, you know? And in fact, he invited me to take a course that he was running at the time with several other people who had eyesight loss. And I didn't really understand what it was about, but I said, yeah, sure, okay. I've got a few weeks off work because of my, you know, things that are happening at the time. And I did the course, and I met all these other people who were in similar situations to me, that were going through their own eyesight, you know, journeys. And there was a way to meet each other, and they were giving us tips of, you know, how to make our life a little bit easier, where we could get more information, and where we could claim things like maybe if you need benefits, or I know, travel passes, or all these kind of things. And what I thought was most amazing about this whole situation was that they were saying that despite any type of eyesight loss that you might have, you could still, you know, enjoy your life. You could still, you know, have a very fulfilling life. You could still create meaningful things. You could be productive. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting, because I was in a bit of a dark place, because I was off work, and I was thinking, well, if work fires me, and what am I going to do? And I was in a bit of a panic mode, and I hadn't even looked out for them. I hadn't even, you know, like, I didn't even go looking on Google anything like what these options are. And I thought that was really, really nice that you guys kind of found me and invited me to take these courses. And now it's like a year later, and I'm here in the office talking to you guys and meeting you guys face to face. It's really amazing. Yeah. Henshaws organised some like virtual tours through the galleries, so that was amazing. We actually got to do a virtual tour of our Manchester Art Gallery and a few other art galleries. And that was really nice, because we got to meet each other as well online, and joke around and tell stories. I would say from my personal story of obviously having some eyesight and then having also the fear of losing it, I think is very different to obviously someone who's probably maybe born with a different type of condition. But for my personal story, I think my main recommendation would be that when you might think something is let's say the end, you know, I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. My whole life is gradually going to get terrible, and I can't work anymore. I can lose my independence. Like, you have all these terrible thoughts. Just to kind of breathe and realize that there's so many different options of doing things, ways of doing things, from working to, you know, creating art, to traveling, to having relationships. Especially now that we live with so much, you know, technology, I would say, like, don't panic. Like, you can still have a really good, healthy, happy life. You can still create. You can, you know, influence people. You can have friends. You can have relationships. Like, you can do anything you want still. Just maybe a different way. That's it. I would say that's my biggest takeaway. If you want to find out more information and see more of my art, you can go onto Instagram, and my name is Matti_art.
Our videos are helping people across the world. If you found them useful, please donate on our website so we can keep making more videos like this in the future.
Henshaws, supporting people with sight loss and a range of other disabilities to go beyond expectations.